All right. Hello, everyone. Hello. Ooh. Hey, CG Happy Mac. Hey, Nick. Hey, how's the audio? How's the quality? Check, check. Video quality, mic check. Is everything good? Audio, video, how is it looking? Hey, clear. Good. Good. Sweet. Hey, swashbuckler. Hmm. One of my favorite topics today. Well, 4:30. There you go. Hello, everyone. It's Thursday, October 21st, 2021. Here we are. Welcome. We're still in. Hey, Anchor. How are ya? Yeah. Welcome to another episode of Introduction to Security offered at Tufts University. I'm Ming Chow, Associate Teaching Professor. Yeah, obligatory. I haven't said this that much for the last couple of times, but yes, it is still Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Yep, Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Until next week. Now we got one more week of October, and today's my favorite topic. Absolutely one of my favorite topics. The hack that hasn't gone away. Today we're gonna do arguably one of the most dangerous web security attacks and vulnerabilities, and that's called Sql Injection. SQL Injection. Yes. Sql Injection. How prevalent it is? Well, let's take a look. So, if you remember from the CWE Top 25, remember the CWE Top 25? This is the latest 2021 version, most dangerous software weaknesses. Here we are, we have something called CWE-89, improper neutralization of special elements using an SQL command, also known as Sql injection. Pretty high up there. Number 6. So if you actually see more information about it, let's see what it is. The software constructs all or part of a SQL command using externally influenced input from an upstream component. But okay, that's a description. Okay, this is also listed on the OWASP Top 10, always under injection. Okay, go to injection. Some of the more common injection are SQL, NoSQL, operating system command, object relational mapping, the list goes on. Okay, so injection's also listed on the, OWASP Top 10. But this is one of my absolute favorite articles of all time, which really just shows how ugly and deadly the problem is. History of SQL injection, the hack that will never go away. Disclosed 15 years ago, over 15 years after it was publicly disclosed, SQL injection is still the number one threat to websites. This was written in 2015, and it's still really relevant up there, even to this very day. It been the root cause. It is one of the. It's a big reason why so many databases and websites get breached. So many databases and data that you shouldn't have access to just get dumped. And we're not talking about just hundreds of thousands of records. We're talking millions and millions of records. Okay. The method, and here's the article says, that method of attack was SQL injection. I mean, I'm off the top of my, there's just way too many incidents. way too many SQL injection incidents over the year. Where a hacker typically enter a malicious command to form on a website to make it churn out juicy bits of data. To make a long story short, what SQL injection uh, is a attack that you conduct to gain access to data that you should not have access to. That includes dumping databases and also gaining access to websites as well. It's been used to steal, okay, here it is, grab data from a Wall Street Journal, yada yada yada. It is the most easy way to attack. A lot of times you actually only need the web browser as well too. Okay? SQL, and why is it still one of the biggest breaches around? Rainforest Puppy, also known as the Forestall, vice versa. The structured query language is a programming language, yada yada yada. Okay? Here it is, over 15 years after it was publicly disclosed. Sql Injection, also known as Sql I, repeatedly sits on the #1 spot. Okay? Alright. Okay. But here's like the gist of the attack is when you go to a web page and you make a request, that parses a part of the data in the request back to a server. For example, when you read in a news article, in the address bar it had ID equals 1, and then it gives you ID number equals 1, and then you do it with ID number equals 2. But with SQL injection attack, an attacker changes the ID in the address bar to something that forces the data here. This is a real key point here. Is with SQL injection attack, an attacker changes that ID in the address bar to something that forces the database to do something it is not meant to do, such as returning a piece of the private data. There you go. And an individual attacker may just return one piece of the piece or section of info, so an attacker is likely to repeat it over and over again as many times as necessary to get every piece of data from the database, Hunt says. We're talking with Troy Hunt, right? Yep, Troy Hunt, founder of Have I Been Owned? So, okay. So that's the gist of SQL injection. That's a mouthful that I just read. But let's have a deeper understanding of the structured query language, SQL. And one of my favorite, if you're not familiar with the structured query language to query databases, that also include insert, update, delete data in databases in structured SQL databases. One of my favorite sites for tutorial is called SQL Zoo, sqlzoo.net. sqlzoo.net. If you go to sqlzoo.net, it has some real important, real cool tutorials to learn the structured query language. And this is a really important skill. It's a really important skill because most of the many applications, whether it's most web application, even like client server application, uses databases, SQL based databases. We're talking things like MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server. The list goes on. I mean, those are some of the most powerful, some of the biggest databases that powers quite a bit of the world's most important apps, like banking, for example. And this is a really good tutorial if you want to learn SQL. So here we go. So here's an example of SQL Basics. So here's a database table called World. A world table of countries. So you have the name of the name. You have the database table has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 5 fields: name, continent, area, population, GDP. And this SQL statement is a very simple, as a sample. It's the SQL command to query. That means search for record is a user statement called a select statement. This is an example where a where clause shows the population of France. Notice that's a string, so yada 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 should be in single quote. So if you want to get the population from this database table of France, you would do select population from world where name equals France. And you hit submit. There you go. And so that's the population of France. Okay? but I modify it to show the population of Germany. Okay, so you would say Germany. There you go. Cool. And you can do this as for your own learning purposes. But let me just give now. Let me fire up Visual Studio Code. All right, here we go. Let me pull up this pad and let me just do an example here. So I am going to have a database table. It's called users. Okay, users have 3 fields: ID, username, password. Okay. One, the username is Batman, and the password is Joker123. And I'm just gonna actually just say Robin smells. Okay, so here we are. We have a database table. Think of a database table as almost like a spreadsheet. Okay, with 1, 2, 3 columns: an identification number, sequential number, username, password. Okay, so let's say you want to select a record. Let's say you want to create a login system. Let username, let $username equals, let $password equals. Okay, so here I put them question marks right now. Okay, so I'm going to write a select statement. Select ID from, in SQL case it's not case sensitive, so you can do it like from, but for syntactical purposes like all caps, from users where username equals, inside single quote, username, and password equals password. There we go. So far so good? So far so good. So $username and $password are going to be user inputs. User inputs. Remember that. Think of $username and $password as variables that contain user inputs from, let's say, a web form. Okay? What we're going to do is we're going to actually replace the question mark with sample user inputs. And then we're going to actually replace the respective $username and $password in the query with the we're going to do some plugging and chugging. So far so good? Okay. All right. So let's username equals, let's do an example where let username equal Catwoman and the password equals Selena. So far so good? So let's say someone entered username as Catwoman and the password as Selena. So let's do some plugging and chugging. So let's replace $username with what we entered, Catwoman. Now remember that the single quote is extreme. Now here's the important thing to know. The single quote is extremely important. The single quote is extremely important because single quotes are used in SQL for strings. Keep that in mind. I repeat, single quotes are very important in the structured query language for strings. Keep that in mind. So I'm going to replace $password in this query with in this statement with the user input, which is Selena. So now we have a SQL statement. Select ID from users where username equals Catwoman and password equals Selena. Now I want to ask you, is there a username Catwoman in the database table users here? The answer is no. So this clause, this part of the statement is going to be false. And is there a username and, well, first of all, this is false. And password equals Selena. Well, is there anyone that with a password Selena? And the answer is also false. So we have false and false equal false. So this SQL statement, this SQL query is false. It's not going to return anything. Okay? All right, let me go back for a second. Let's do a good example. Let's do Robin and smells. All right. So imagine if the user input for $sign username is Robin and the user input for $sign password is smells. So we do a plugin chug, replace $sign username with Robin and the $sign password with smells. Select ID from users where username equals Robin. Is there a username in this database table called Robin? Yep, right here. And is the password smells? Yep, right here. So what's going to happen is this SQL statement, this select statement is going to return just the number 2 because you're just selecting the ID. So far so good? All right. Now if I change smells to, let's say small. Wait. Did I do that correctly? I'm going to do a redo. I said smells, right? I'm kind of embarrassed now. Alright. Robin, and then, whoop. Robin smells. Alright, yeah, there we go. That's true. Now, if I do if I do the $sign password of smalls instead of smells, now it's going to change a little bit. I made a small change, which is $sign username, $sign password is smalls, and okay, where username equals Robin, okay, we got that, and password equals smalls, but is there a small password? And the answer is no. So this statement is not going to return anything because it's true and false, which equates to false. Okay, so far so good? All right. All right, so now let's do it all. Oops. Let's do this again. So now let's do something a little bit interesting. So let's say the username, and this is Craftmaster85, you said Riddler. And the password is ho ho ho. Aha! So the user input for $sign username is Riddler, and the user input for $sign password is ho ho ho. We're going to do a plugin chug. We're going to replace $sign username in the SQL statement, in this statement, with Riddler. And we're going to replace this $sign password in the SQL with ho ho. Okay, so select ID from users where username equals Riddler. Is there a Riddler in the database table? Nope. And password equals ho ho ho. All right. So we have no username with no username with Riddler and no password with ho ho ho. So this statement is going to return nothing. False. Completely false. Going to return nothing at all. But this is where the funny business happens. But we can do some funny business, and we can actually craft a user input where we can return everything in the database table users. We can force we can force the system to return all the records. That means we can force this SQL statement to be true. And the trick is to use a single quote. Now, remember, let's actually say username is Riddler, and the password is, okay, let's do this. Ho, semicolon, or semicolon 1, semicolon equals semicolon, not semicolon, quote. Okay, so let's password equals ho ho ho, single quote, or single quote, 1 single quote equals single quote 1 single quote. There you go. So the $, the user input for $username is Riddler. That hasn't changed. But now let's take a look at this password that was just entered. We're going to replace the $password in the Sql statement with what we just typed in for $password. And here we go. Now let's run this through. Select ID from users where username equals single quote Riddler single quote and password equals single quote ho ho single quote or single quote 1 single quote equals single quote 1 single quote single quote. Now the problem with this SQL statement here is it is going to be a syntax error because there is an extra single quote at the end. Quoting matters. There's an extra single quote at the end. So this is going to throw a syntax error. Okay? But wait a minute. Let's do this all over again. Now, let's do ho-ho. Again, single quote or space, single quote, 1 single quote equals single quote 1. But no closing single quote. Now then, we're going to take what we just typed in, the user input, and replace the $password in the statement. Select ID from users where username equals single quote Riddler, single quote space, and password equals single quote ho ho, single quote space, or single quote space, single quote 1, single quote equals single quote 1, single quote. Okay. This is not going to throw, okay, this is not going to throw a syntax error. This is actually legal syntax. There's no syntax error in this statement on line 12. Looks good to me. It looks really good. Well formed and sound. So, but let's do the math out. Where username equals Riddler. Is there a username equals Riddler here? Nope. In the database table? Nope. And password equals ho-ho. Is there a password equals ho-ho? No. So we have false and false. What's false and false? False. But wait a minute. We have an OR we have an OR operator here, or operand, one word. But then we have single quote 1 single quote equals single quote 1 single quote. What is single quote 1 single quote equals single 1 single quote always going to be? Or in other words, what's 1 equals 1? What is that always going to be? Okay, so, we have false and false or true. You do it from left to right, what will the statement be like? Add it all up together from left to right. False and false is always going to be false. But what is false or true? That's where the thing got interesting. So false and false is going to be false. False or true, because this last part is always going to be true, it's always going to be true. Anything or true is always going to be true. So this statement is always going to be true. So basically it boils down to select ID from users where true. So what it's going to do, it's just going to return IDs 1 and 2. Okay? Now, in SQL, the structured query language, okay, so this statement is always going to be, really boils down to select ID from users where true. So it's going to say, okay, which ID? I'm just going to return all of them. It's going to return ID number 1 or ID number 2. Now, a lot of people write SQL statements like this. Select star from users where username equals, whatever, everything that's tailing it. What the asterisk in SQL is to return everything. Select star from users where username equals Riddler and password equals ho-ho. And so what this was going to do is actually going to return select star, which means return everything. And what this statement on line number 12 is going to do, it's just going to return everything from the user table. All the IDs, username, and passwords. That because you have SQL injection now, because of the single quote, ting, you just dump the entire users table. Yeah. Okay. Pretty cool, isn't it? Alright, alright. So let's use this same technique. Let's use this same technique that we just learned with SQL injection and using single quotes to really screw up with the SQL statement. And let's do a database dump of a table or two. Okay, so let's go to http://34.125.213.242. Yeah, how do you interpret that? Great question. From left to right. From left to right. So Nick Riceball had it. False and false or true. Number one. Oop, this is actually so interesting. Well, because I did this, if you go to http://34.131, go to http://34.125.213.242. You go to this website right now. And this is a little mistake I made because this wasn't the URL I wanted people to go to, but this is a lab in the cybersecurity class. So actually, and this is very related to SQL injection, break into the website. Yeah, bypass that. Break into the website, bypass the authentication using SQL injection. Yep, and this is the 7th lab in my security class. But this wasn't actually where I wanted to go. Where I wanted to go with the damn vulnerable web application is DVWA. This is where I really want to go. Let's do a practice round first. Let's practice. Let's practice before you break into that website at 34.125.213.242. Let's do admin and password. I'm going to reset the database for now. Okay. The activity that we want to do is SQL injection. Okay. So here we go. SQL injection. Enter a user ID. Is it? Let me just double check. SQL operator precedent. I found this one. There we go. For things like SQL here, that operator precedence. Also, interesting. They're evaluated from left. When two operators in an expression have the same precedence level, they are evaluated from left to right based on their position in the expression. Okay. Okay. So let's do this one out. Let's do this vulnerability out. Do an ID. Let's do ID number 1. Okay. ID equals 2. Okay. ID equals 3. Okay. Alright. So, dump the database table. Dump the database table here. So you get all the first name, all the IDs, all the first name, all the surnames. Dump them all. And if you do a view source as a hint, you can see here it is. Get the input, which is $ID equals request.id. Check the database, and the SQL statement is this. Select first name, last name. Actually, you're only going to get first name and last name. Select first name, last name from users where user ID equals single quote, $ID, single quote. That's a hint. Let me show that again. That's a hint. So what do you do? Okay. So what about 99? Give me a number. Give me a number. Anyone? Okay, 42. Hey, we guessed correctly. 42. How did you know? Perfect. You and I said literally at that. You typed at the same time, apathetic fox, and I said at the same time. So it doesn't exist. I mean, what happened if you did this? Let's do one single quote or single quote one single quote equals single quote one single quote. Hit submit. So the payload becomes that. This is wrong. This is the wrong payload. Oh, shoot. Alright, here's a big hint that you got Sql injection. When a website is throwing errors like this, you know there's chances are there is a Sql injection somewhere. That's not good. So a big giveaway of Sql injection is usually an error message like this. Syntax error, there it is. That's not good. Not good at all. But why don't we do this? Let's do it again. But this time we don't have a trailing single quote. We don't have an ending single quote. So it's going to be one single quote space or space single quote one let me back. One single quote space or space single quote one single quote equals single quote one, no closing single quote. And there you go. We got a whole dump of the database. Admin, Gordon Brown, Hackme, Pablo Picasso, Bob Smith. You get all the records. That's the payload. Cool. And the Sql injection. Getting access to all the records that you shouldn't have access to. So now, here's the thing. You can actually use the same technique, bypass the authentication. Find the key or the phrase that pays. You can do it now. You have all the tools in the world. Now here's the key. If you're taking more than 5 minutes to do this lab, to break into the site, you're doing it wrong. I repeat, if you're taking more than 5 minutes to break into the site, to bypass the authentication, you're doing it wrong. It should take you maybe like a minute or two to do it. Anything more than 5 minutes, you're doing it wrong. Alright, so I want to go back. So the damn vulnerable web application is a deliberately vulnerable web application that we can learn all kind of, just a quick review, to learn all kind of web application security vulnerabilities. Well, this is a deliberately vulnerable web application that is damn vulnerable to learn about web security. We just did Sql injection. Okay. We also did cross-site scripting. But hold on for a second. I want to go to this cross-site scripting reflected exercise. Not this one. Cross-site scripting stored. And I'm going to type in the name called ABCDEFGHIJKLM. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Also, the message also has, and it has a length required, has a length as well. So what I'm showing you here in this exercise, in this vulnerability, is that the name and the message both have a character limit. So you may be wondering, is there a way you can bypass a character limit? And the answer is yes. Wait a minute, what does this have to do with Sql injection? Well, what does it have to do with Sql injection is I also have at 34.125.213.242, I also have something called a deliberately vulnerable voter database. I created this called the deliberately vulnerable voter database. I created this. If you go to github.com, let me tell you one. the source code is here. This is a deliberately vulnerable voter database. And I created this project a couple months ago, to demonstrate what happened when a voter database, including a web form, are not well developed and have vulnerabilities. The audience I want is for developers and also lawmakers and politicians. I also made a disclaimer. Yep, you can have the Docker instructions, but the reference is interesting because I have a bunch of it, like Sql Injection tied to election commission breach, how to rush and penetrate election computers, and yeah, you can even see Sql Injection is actually even used for that. The list goes on. So this is free and open source on GitHub that you can use. But like this stored cross-site scripting vulnerability exercise in a damn vulnerable web application, there's also a constraint with a couple of fields. First name, the constraint is date of birth month, date of birth day, date of birth year. There's constraints. There's also a constraint with the zip code. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These are all built in. These are all client-side constraints. If you do a view source on the HTML, the date of birth, month, day, and year are all pull-down fields. And the zip code, here it is, by the source code, has a max length of 5. So you may be wondering, okay, so now this exercise on stored cross-site scripting vulnerability on the damn vulnerable web app, and also this fake find my voter registration status, this also has constraints. Is there a way you can bypass this? It's not going to give you any results. And the answer is yes. So I want to ask a question. How does the web work? You have to describe how the web works. Well, how does the web work? Anyone explain how the web works? Yeah, it's a series of requests and response from the client to serve. Perfect. Like a pathetic fox. Got it. Absolutely nailed it. So, one of my favorite pictures on how the web works is here. This is one of my favorite pictures. It's so nice. So how the web works is click, click, click. Like you type in your URL on the web browser, which is also known as your client, as our pathetic fox wrote. You hit the enter key, and your web browser will make something called a request to a web server somewhere on the internet. The web server will then send you back a response. That's how the web works. It's a request-response protocol. Your client will make a direct connection with the web server somewhere on the internet. Guess the server doesn't validate the... Aha, there it is. No. No. Nope. You probably guessed right, star key. Guess the server doesn't validate the length of the field. Only HTML checks it, right? Yep, only the HTML. Unfortunately, many people mistaken that, the HTML is good enough. And the sad reality is it is not good enough. No, it is not good enough. The server doesn't validate it. Okay? And if the web server doesn't validate input correctly, like anything, you're going to have some serious problems. Okay? So, alright, so what are we going to do? Is there a way to, bypass the character limit of the zip code of the stored cross-site scripting vulnerability? Yeah, absolutely. What if I told you we need a tool that we can run that can when you hit the enter key on your keyboard to make an HTTP request, it doesn't go directly to the server right away. It gets intercepted. It gets captured by a tool called a web proxy. Think of a proxy as a middleman. Your requests get intercepted by the proxy. Your request stops. But then what you can do is you can mangle your input to any way that you want. Then you forward that request to the web server, and the web server sends you back an HTTP response as normal. Yep. So instead of making a direct connection to the web server in this model, we insert something called a web proxy, a proxy software, proxy tool that intercepts requests anytime we send it. We make our changes on the proxy to our imports, then we forward it and send it to then it gets sent to the server directly by the proxy. And there are a couple of famous web proxies out there, but by far and away one of the most famous ones is Portswigger's Burp Suite. Burp Suite. Now, last week I did mention I talked about Burp Suite as a vulnerability scanning tool. Okay. Now, the problem with the Burp Suite is that the vulnerability scanner is only for paying customers, only for paid version only, not in the free community edition. Not bad. Okay. So, but the community edition does have something called the proxy. Okay. And other essential tools. But what we're going to do now is we're going to actually use Burp Suite to actually, well, do exactly what I said, which is intercept HTTP requests, and then we can mangle our requests and do whatever we want with that. We change the import, then get to have that forwarded to the web server. Burp Suite Community Edition is free, and it is one of the most famous tools, also really necessary if you're going to do web application security. Okay? So what you do is you download it. You download the Community Edition. We'll go straight to download. You pick your download, platform independent. It is, Burp was written in Java. Okay? So now, I'm going to leave this open anyway. I'm going to leave this open. I have Burp Suite installed on my computer. On my Mac, if you install Burp Suite Community Edition, it's going to look like this. There you go. Run. Burp Suite Community Edition, version 28. Okay, I'm going to hit next. Start temporary project. Use the Burp default. Start Burp. Okay, there we go. And Burp Suite. We load up Burp Suite again. Now, the newer version, this is the newest version, the latest updates to Burp Suite Community Edition actually does something enormously beneficial. Back in the days, when you actually downloaded Burp Suite, you also had to configure your web browser or your system to intercept all requests. So the best web browser to use back in the day was Firefox, because in Firefox you can actually change like where you can actually customize the proxy that you want to use. What's really awesome now is that Burp Suite has a built-in web browser. So you don't need to do any configuration really. Here we go, hit Burp Suite Community Edition. And here's your dashboard, but the place that you want to go now is to go to the proxy. Here you go. Here is the proxy, and by default it's going to intercept everything. Intercept is on. Alright, if this is your first time you want to take a look at a guide to make it look, okay, let's go that, let's do that. And actually fires up. Okay, using the Burp proxy. Proxy tool allows a harder user driven flow and gives, And one of the nice things about how Burp, what it does, it gives you a direct view of how your application target works and looks under the hood, like all the files, images, list goes on. It operates as a web proxy server and assists as a monkey in the middle, man in the middle between your browser and the destination web servers. This lets you intercept, inspect, and modify raw traffic passing in both directions. You can actually use Burp for HTTPS traffic as well. If the application employs HTTPS, Burp breaks the TLS connection between your browser and the server so that even encrypted data can be viewed and modified using within Burp's tool. Okay. Now, again, the beautiful thing about Burp Suite is that it has an embedded web browser. There it is, intercepting requests and responses. Really, really cool. Good stuff. There you go. It has a pretty good documentation. I want to give a shout out to the people to the folks at Portswigger. Yeah, I don't know how long. I mean, I've been using this for well over a decade. All right. So actually, let's do one out. Well, let's enable interceptors on and open a web browser. All right, there you go. And once you hit the button, open web browser, it's going to open up the embedded web browser it's going to open up the embedded Chromium browsers, like Chromium. So let's do the vulnerable voter database. That we had. Now copy the URL that we had before. I don't need Brave anymore. I quit out of it. Now, here I am in the embedded Chromium browser for Burp Suite. I'm going to http://34.125.213.242.voter database. Watch what happens when I hit enter. Now, you notice when I hit the enter key in the URL, the request got intercepted by the proxy. You can see the proxy tab turn orange, intercept, request to http://34.125.213.242:80. 80 is a web browser. Is a web server. The GET request, the host, all the HTTP request headers fields here. Now, I have a choice to either forward this request to the actual web server or drop it. I'm going to forward it because the page actually loads. There we go. So, you can assume, as Starkey said, that the server side does not validate anything. So I'm going to type stuff in, like A, B, January 2nd, and I don't care. 11, okay, 11, okay, I can type in any zip code, 11111. I can do A, it doesn't matter. I hit submit button. Watch what happens. And I hit submit. Ready? So, again, any request that is made, it will be intercepted by the proxy. Watch what happens when I hit the submit button. You'll see the proxy button. You'll see the proxy tab in orange. Intercepted. There you go. It intercepted it's a post request because we're filling out form data. It's an HTTP post request because we're filling out form data. Host. You can even see cookies that store states, refer, connection, and notice right here is the interesting part. First name equals A, last name equals B, date of birth, month equals, yeah, there you go, look at that. Understand equals on. So what you can do now is you can modify anything. Like zip code, you can make it to be 01234567890, 01234567890. So now you can see that the zip code field is way longer than 5 characters. Way longer than 5 characters. I'm going to hit forward. What's going to happen? No results. Alright, so let's do it again. So now let's do B, I don't care. June 9. Now we're going to do A. You can type in anything. I do need to check the box off. Hit submit. Now you do first name equals B, last name equals B, date of birth month equals 6, date of birth month equals 9, date of birth year equals 1992 now, and the zip code equals A, what we just typed in. Alright, let's now do our Sql injection on the zip code field. Let's try that first. A semicolon space or, no. A single quote or space or single quote 1 single quote equals single quote 1, no closing single quote. Okay, so our zip code is going to be lowercase a single quote space or space single quote 1 single quote equals single quote 1. I'm going to hit forward. Watch what happens. Boom. This is all fake data. All the records. I think there should be 100,000 records, at least 10,000, but I think there were 100,000. Pretty long. Dumps the entire database. Dump the entire database of voters. This is all fake data. Yeah. So using Sql Injection and web proxy, we just dumped the entire database here. What's also nice about Burp Suite is, if you go to the Target tab, you can actually see the structure of the website. You can see CSS file, what goes on. Let's use Burp Suite now. Yeah, maybe I can. Hold on. User option. Display. Let me just do 18. Try that. Yep. There you go. That's too much. Let's do 16. Beautiful. Proxy. There you go. That a little better? You have to change the font size. Let's do one again. Now, it's hard to actually, shoot. You can't really modify the size of the thing, of the payload. Is a web proxy between your breakout? No. Is default user, is the web proxy between, no. I have no Brave on. It's between the Chromium browser, which is now part of, the web proxy is between Chromium browser. Between Chromium. So let's go do this again. Let's go to damn vulnerable web application. Ready? I'm going to hit enter. Oh, I need to drop this old request here. Alright, now it says get DVWA. I'm going to forward this. What? I'm going to forward it again. DVWA. Oh, well, okay. There you go. So here's a damn vulnerable web application that we've been using previously. Username is admin. The password is password. Hit login. Boom. Username, you can even see the user entry. Username equals admin and password equals password. And login equals login and user token equals yada yada yada. And forward the request. Forward the request again. Nah, never. Okay. So any request I make gets forwarded to the proxy. Let's go to that XSS stored exercise again. So Chrome reflects what's happening up. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to click on cross-site scripting stored. Ready? So if I click on cross-site scripting stored, I should get something. I'm going to get something on the proxy tab on Burp. There you go. I'm going to forward the request. You know what? Here, this may make it even more clear. There you go. That may make it a little bit more clear. I'm going to forward the request. There you go. So now I'm going to type in A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, okay, whatever. I'm going to type in all kind of messages. I'm going to sign the guest book. I hit sign the guest book. Burp intercept the request. And you notice now that here is the text name. Text name is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. And the message can be anything. I mean, this one just can be a whole stream of A's. 1, 2, 3, 4. That can be like, I can just do, just paste a whole bunch of A's. Alright, so I have a username now that's going to be longer than the 10 characters, and a pretty long message. I'm hit forward. Watch what happened. Oh, data too long for column at 1. Interesting. Got a exact cross-site scripting stored. Forward. There you go. Well, hello. Whoever did that, hello, thank you. Let's do it A and A again. Sign the guest book. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. And the message is going to be, just going to do a bunch of A's. Hit forward. And there we go. Just posted the message. Yep, exactly. Yep, default user, you got it. One more. I want to do, of course, a fun one, what it really means. Sign the guest book. But what happens about cross-site scripting is, I'll just do something fun. Hacked by its default user. Yep. Alright. And the message is, forward this. Should work, right? Yep. Boom. Hacked by default user. We got cross-site scripting. There you go. Yep. Default user, you got it. And if I hit the refresh on the page again, yeah, I'm going to continue. Yeah, for the request. Hacked by default user, cross-site scripting. Alright. So now we've done two things. We've done, well, actually, you know what? One more. Just want to go back for a second. We've got a dashboard. Oh, target. And you can see, wow, look at that. Look at all the stuff. The target on Burp Suite actually even breaks down, actually builds a whole tree of the website. Really nice. Yeah. What happens if you use like things like a proxy for like Reddit? Say reddit.com. Proxy. Forward. Let's not even turn the interception on. Let's yeah, you can use a proxy for any website. And of course you can see Reddit. You can see all the folders, the tree of the entire, it's really nice. You can see the tree of the entire Reddit website. So now we've actually done two very important things today. We've done Sql Injection, and we've done proxies, web proxies like Burp Suite. So where do we go from here? So there's two more things I want to mention is, okay, how do you defend against cross-site scripting? I mean, no. How do you defend against Sql Injection? I don't need this anymore. I'm close. All right. Let's do Brave again. So how do you actually defend against Sql Injection? Okay, in class, do you remember when someone cross-site scripting and showed on, yep. How did changing the client-side code both happen? There was no change of the client. How did changing client-side code happen on both browsers? Yeah, so it really was because, well, here's the thing. Anytime when a web browser sees something like script, alert, yada, 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 in the HTML, in the hypertext markup language, it's just going to render it on your browser as a JavaScript. So it really wasn't even changing much client-side code. This was always stored, like the JavaScript was stored in a database somewhere. But when your web browser renders and tries to render anything that starts with script, to open script tag and close script tag, it's going to render it as JavaScript. So there's really no changing of the code. The only thing is this code is dynamic, that is stored in a database somewhere. Yep. So where do we go from here? So how do you defend against for Sql injection? It's really the same idea of how you actually defend against cross-site scripting. You always want to validate input. You strip out special, the draconian or most doltish way is strip out special characters like the single quote. That's a pretty, that will work, but it's also draconian. It's not very, because, there's some cases that you want to use a single quote. The other option is the real effective option. Let's go to OWASP, Sql Injection. I'll share this with everyone. Sql Injection doesn't matter what language it is, because every language can use like something. Every programming language have used to database interactions. Testing guide. This is here it is. The Sql Injection prevention sheet. There we go. Really, it boils down to really two things for Sql Injection. Number one is option number one is, of course, input validation. Just remove special characters like the single quote. But the more effective option is to use something called prepared statements. Parameterization. Parameterize queries. Here's a good example. It's like unsafe. SQL injection flaws typically look like this. The following Java example is unsafe. Would allow an attacker to inject code in a query that would be executed by the database. The unvalidated customer name parameter is simply appended to the query that allows an attacker to inject any SQL code that they want. Unfortunately, this method for accessing databases is too common. Sadly, this is how people have built stuff all the time. Built web apps for years using single quote, like using string concatenation with single quotes and stuff. But the primary defense, really, which is a form of input validation, is to use something called prepared statements. So the whole idea of prepared statement is variable binding, parameterized queries. Now, this is a coding style in which whatever the user input is, it is never treated as code. It is always treated as data to be inputted into a database. So prepared statements ensure that an attacker is not able to change the intent of a query. So there's no string concatenation involved here. Even if SQL commands are inserted by an attacker. In the safe example below, if an attacker would enter the user ID of, the classic SQL injection payload of whatever it is, in this case Tom single quote space or space single quote 1 single quote equals single quote 1, the parameterized query would not be vulnerable and would instead look for a username that is literally match the entire string, Tom single quote space or space single quote 1 single quote equals single quote 1. Okay? If your user input is actually part of a command, okay, if it was actually string concatenation on top of the SQL statement command, then you got bigger problem. But parameterized prepared statements or parameterized queries at whatever the user type in, no matter what garbage the user types in, it will be treated as data. Never, ever, ever as part of a command, SQL command. Okay? Prepared statements are available for any programming language. Okay? You can even do things like stored procedure. Okay? So those are the two most effective ways, really boils down to input validation really boils down to validate input, never trust user input, never trust user input, never trust user input. In the case of SQL injection, always want to use prepared statements. So variable binding. Data is always treated as data, never part of a SQL command or SQL statement. Okay? So where else can what else can I do now? Alright, so that's the defense for SQL injection. There's one more thing I just want to give a shout out to, Portswigger. Portswigger also have something called a Web Security Academy. If you really like this stuff, if you really want more hands-on exercises, like what I just showed you, like things like the damn vulnerable web application, Portswigger has something called a Web Security Academy. It's free. Okay, it's a free online web security training from creators of Burp Suite. You can boost your career, flexible learning, learn from expert, and there's a whole bunch of labs. 16 labs on SQL injection. Whole bunch of hands-on labs on SQL injection. Many high-profile data breaches in recent years have been a result of SQL injection attacks leading to reputational damage and regulatory fine. In some cases, an attacker can obtain a persistent backdoor into an organization system, leading to a long-term compromise that can go unnoticed for an extended period of time. Okay. Good tutorial, good documentation. Examining a database. Really, really, really cool. Also, you may be wondering if there is, is there a tool that can automate the stuff? And the answer is yes, of course, yes there is. One of my favorite tools is called, well, remember that article I showed you earlier on SQL injection? Twice. SQL injection, the hack that will never go away. There is a famous tool called SQL Map, all one word. Okay, that it just does SQL injection automation for you. Yeah, there you go. It's on GitHub. SQL Map. Oh, actually, if you do SQLmap.org, source code's on GitHub. SQL Map is an open source penetration testing tool that automates the process of detecting and exploiting SQL injection flaws and taking over database servers. Does a lot of work for you. But it's nice, it's really cool, but, you can use this, but certainly understand what SQL injection is before you start, just hammering pen testing tool. But you got that foundation today. Now you can free to go use SQL Map. So yeah. So we did SQL injection and web proxies today. That's all I got, folks. That's all for today. So my absolute favorite two topics, web proxy, SQL injection. Okay. Now you know one of the most dangerous tricks in the book for web application, for attacking web applications. All right, that's all. Happy Thursday, everyone. Happy Thursday, that's it. We are done. Now, if you're in the security class, you can do the lab. All right, thanks all.